conflict between groups, intergroup conflicts. So there was a lot of interest in the 60s in particular in the US among social psychologists to understand things like racism, like, especially in the US, the history of racism, the desegregation that was happening. How do you, you look at the events that happen in the South today in the US, and it's still present. But, throughout the history of every country of the world, groups have fought against each other, different religions, different races, different subgroups. And the question was, how do you overcome that? Social psychologists were interested in, is there a way to cure people of their racism? Is there a process to turn a racist person into a non-racist person? Hard to do, but they found there's a few methods that have been found throughout history, that some of them we know about, that can help overcome conflict between groups. So the first one, and that's been known, Machiavelli, for example, Italian writer about politics, really emphasized that one, introducing a common enemy. Whenever you have two groups that are in disagreement with each other, when they find a common enemy, they will join forces to fight that common enemy. Right? People, Democrats and Republicans, we might be disagreeing with each other. September 11th happens, and everybody's like, "Whoa, we're all Americans now. Forget about Republican and Democrats. We have a common enemy, which are the terrorists. That we have to fight." Right? War. Any kind of large-scale conflict, sometimes natural catastrophes bring people together. You hate your neighbor, but there's an earthquake that destroys both of your homes, and you forget about the fact that you hate your neighbor. You're like, let's help each other in this tragedy. Right? Politicians will sometimes invent a false common enemy to divert people away from infighting. Finding what's the term? A scapegoat, right? The notion of scapegoating a group of people in order to unify other people. Again, so to state, terrorism. The war on terror is a good example of that, right? Let's focus away from economic who's, in particular, like during the economic crisis, and find another common enemy that's out there, so we can say that's the goal, not us, not the banks, not the economic system. It's the terrorists. And we're always at war with it, and people will have their eyes on that, and we rile them up, and they will not focus on other problems. When you look at what a common enemy is, you realize that it's a special case of a larger concept, which is the notion of superordinate goal. That's a goal that transcends other less important goals. So introducing a common enemy, what it does is it puts to the fore the common goal of survival. Our survival is at stake. A great example of that is movies where aliens attack the Earth. Right? Like Independence Day. Have you guys seen that movie, Independence Day, right? Funny movie. So aliens come in and they try to destroy the whole planet, and all of the countries now, like, we don't care about wars. We have even war on terror. ISIS starts fighting the aliens, and so do the Americans and the Russians, and all of that, because our survival as a species is at stake. So that's survival of the species become the superordinate goal, the goal that we agree upon. There are other forms of superordinate goals that are not necessarily common enemy. You could say, well, science, discovering how the universe works, discovering a new cure for cancer, that could be a superordinate goal, right? Fighting climate change, well, it's still somewhat related to survival, but artistic goals, harmony, those could be examples of superordinate goals. I wanted to show you Kennedy's New Frontier speech is a great example of a set of superordinate goals. So I discovered in the past that a lot of people didn't know about that speech. I mean, didn't know, had never heard it. So it's one of the greatest speeches written in America in, in America in the last 100 years. And what happened? So this is the speech that Kennedy gave when he received nomination from the Democratic Convention Party, and he established his program. And what was his program about? It was about a set of superordinate goals. Now, remember the context, 1960, right? America was probably at the height of its power. It had won the Second World War. It was the richest country in the world, the most technologically advanced. There was no unemployment. It had the greatest reserves of gold, no debt, no China or Japan or Middle East to owe money to, no oil problems yet. There were still things like racism, right? But really, so there was the Cold War was still happening, but America was faring fairly well in that, and it wasn't big danger. So there was a risk of really complacency. What do you do in the 60s? Well, you could just fall asleep at the wheel and say everything is well in the greatest of worlds. And what Kennedy says is, no, there are a few new goals that we want to follow. The notion of frontier, new frontier, is related to the old notion of frontier in the US. So how did US develop from the East Coast to the West Coast? By going west, by pushing the frontier west. And the American dream is all about that. You can go west and you'll be given lands freely, and you can make your destiny for free. If you have the courage and the guts to go west, you can have your homestead, right? But then, in the 60s, America's boundaries have been fixed. There's no more boundaries, no more physical land boundary to go for. So Kennedy talks about metaphorical frontiers. What else can we do? So let's look at this. Let's listen to this great speech.